163 yet again. We got Palmer Hittesdorf behind the camera there. Didn't do his thumbs up. I'm a little bit surprised. He must be distracted. We got Kris White with us. We got Douds with us, and you're with the American Battlefield Trust once again. We're really psyched that, this morning we already launched a summary as a YouTube short of July 2nd. We already launched our pre-shot video, It was beautiful weather last week, covering sort of, the south end of the field. We went from South Confederate Avenue through the Slider Farm and all sorts of other areas, going to Devil's Den, the wheat field, and overlooking Little Round Top and whatnot. So make sure you check those out and share those with your friends before you share this one with your friends as we go around and try to cover Gettysburg's largest attack. I'm going to suggest it is, but we'll talk about the dynamics of why we think this attack is larger than Pickett's charge. Okay, so we're going to get walking. Just a reminder real quick that we're trying to do something a little different. Less of our faces, more of the battlefield. And to that end, we're going to walk over toward the Louisiana Monument. We'll talk about it right around here. Maybe Doug Douds wants to summarize that thing before we walk over, because there's a guided tour there that we don't want to disturb.
Hey, Gary, thanks. It's, first of all, pleasure to be here with everybody this morning. So Louisiana is going to go ahead and do this whole idea. Sorry, 1971. He's going to do this idea because this is where the Washington artillery is. This is where a lot of Louisiana artillery units are. So if you take a good look at the monument, and as we walk over there, you'll see, so Spirit of the Confederacy rising above one of her fallen soldiers, or as we all better know, that is Santa Barbara, the patron saint of artillerists. Notice the flaming cannonball that she holds in her hand today. Still the patron saint of artillerists and ordnancemen, and firemen for that matter. We can see the dead below their feet. This is why this monument is located here in this particular position, because it is where the many of these Louisiana batteries are placed that are going to fire in support of these attacks launched on July 2nd, and many of the same artillery batteries are going to support what we know as Longstreet's assault or Pickett's charge on July 3rd.
Good, and let's just walk quietly. We'll have a moment as then. We'll circle the monument and then walk over toward another Confederate monument here. So take it away, Palmer.
Good morning.
I have about 75,000.
And as we head south, what we're going to do is we're on the Confederate side of the line. We're walking down West Confederate Avenue. We're headed towards the Mississippi Monument. Same sculptor, Donald Blue, dedicated in 1973. Now, this is to all the 4,900 men in Lee's army from the state of Mississippi. But one of the reasons it's here is because this is where Barksdale's Mississippi Brigade will be their line of departure for the attack that we're going to follow as we walk towards the Peach Orchard later on. What it's going to depict is a fallen Confederate color bearer with a Mississippi soldier swinging his rifle like a club, trying to protect the colors. It is a logical place to put it. Mississippians have a lot of contributions here, but one of the most famous ones, and arguably one of the most impactful ones, is when Barksdale's Mississippi Brigade here is going to cover this nearly 600 yards over to the Peach Orchard just off to our east on the late afternoon, early evening of July 2nd, 1863.
Yeah, and Doug, I just want to point out with the last monument that we looked at was Louisiana. Donald DeLue has 3 monuments here on the Gettysburg battlefield. He has Louisiana, Mississippi, both cost $100,000 a piece. And then he has the soldiers and sailors of the Confederacy placed in 1965 down on the south end of the field. But the Louisiana monument might look familiar to some folks because he built another monument in 1956 over in the Coulville-sur-Mer Cemetery in Normandy, and that is the Spirit of American Youth Rising from the Waves. And it is a very, very similar statue, allegorical statue, that was dedicated by General Mark Clark in 1956 over there in the Coulville-sur-Mer Cemetery. So it might look familiar to you. But the Mississippi Monument, I always love to point out the fact here, just how large their hands and their feet are on these monuments. So they're a little bit oversized.
And they look pretty similar, the hands to the feet.
They do. What I do like about it is that the Mississippi soldiers here, there are 4 regiments with Barksdale's brigade. We're going to talk a lot about them, the 13th Mississippi, 17th, 18th, 21st. All of them are carrying Enfield rifles, but with the sword bayonet. It's an Enfield 1856-58 model bayonet that is 22.7 inches long. So when they put their bayonets on the ends of their guns, these things are going to look super intimidating. So whenever you see what looks like a sword handle, it's a sword bayonet that they would actually withdraw, place on the ends of their guns. So this would have been a very intimidating look when the Mississippians would make their most magnificent charge if any of them had their bayonets fixed.
Good, good. Let's keep walking here. You know, one thing I've learned about being a guide for 30 years is when Kris starts rattling off regiments, it's going to be a good day. So as we walk here, you know, we're going to see, you know, the Confederate line, the places they attacked, where the Union defended and whatnot. But this is called by James Longstreet the best 3 hours fighting ever done by any troops on any battlefields, referring to his 2 divisions, Hood's division and McLaws division. Now, the Louisianians, or namely the Mississippians that we're walking down, we are on McLaws line. Lafayette McLaws, Georgian, may be one of the more impressive, or I think kind of big cascading beards of the Civil War. You know, he is, you know, just one of 4 brigades. McLaws has 2 brigades in front, Kershaw's South Carolinians, and then Barksdale's Mississippians. Now, if we were to go forward about 2/3, 3/4 of a mile, we would be on John Bell Hood's line. Hood has Alabamians under Evander Law and Texans and Arkansans under Jerome Bonaparte Robertson. And all of those 4 brigades from 2 divisions are supported each by a brigade of Georgians. People like Tige Anderson and Henry Louis Benning and William Wofford and Paul Semmes. So they've got some punch to them. Now, these 2 divisions are going to do the bulk of the fighting in the famous places on the south end of the field. Devil's Den, Little Round Top, the wheat field, the peach orchard, and into the Cadore Swale. But they're also you know, not alone. There's going to be 3 more brigades on their left in Richard Anderson's divisions. Remember, armies are made of corps of divisions, divisions of brigades, brigades of regiments, okay? So we're going to do our best to sort of orient you to this, but this is what we're going to be covering, this assault of those 11 brigades, more brigades in Pickett's charge, but 2.5 sort of divisions, just like in Pickett's charge. Either you guys want to pick up with Anderson's division and how they're kind of moving on McLaws's left?
I'll let Doug pick that up, but I just want to orient, speaking of orientation, we're heading along the Millerstown Road right now. This will intersect with the Emmitsburg Road and the Wheatfield Road. We're going due east. This is a wartime road that would have been utilized by the Confederates. I'm sure Doug will talk about it in a moment. When the Confederates arrive here in the afternoon of July 2nd, 1863, Lafayette McLaws, who is supposed to lead the attack on July 2nd, is supposed to march down this road, go beyond the peach orchard, face his men to the left, and march north along the Emmitsburg Road, hitting what he thinks is just 2 regiments of Union infantry and 1 battery, and take the enemy in the flank. But as we're soon to find out, that is not at all the case. Doug?
Hey, as we leave the Confederate line of departure, and we just got done walking past a good couple pieces of artillery, let's think about the bombardment. As the Confederates arrived to this side of the field about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, remember the initial game plan is we were going to march 2 divisions straight out across these fields. We were going to basically get on the other side of the Emmitsburg Road, everybody do a grand left face, and we were going to attack 2 divisions in trace. It's when they realized that Union troops are just across the field, as you can see the peach orchard as we look to the east, they realize there's Union troops there. We can't execute the game plan we came up with. As they changed their game plan to launch this attack, as Garry was setting up from south to north, artillery is going to come up on this ridgeline, and what E.P. Alexander thought would be a short, sharp fight, one of the few times that he thinks they're going to have at least parity, if not an advantage, because the range is so short. I mean, this is point blank for artillery, that he goes, our poorly manufactured ammunition will be less of a factor, and I thought we would have a difference. Ultimately, that doesn't necessarily prove to be true because of the obstinacy of the Union artillery firing back. But we just passed Moody's battery, one of the only batteries carrying 4 24-pound howitzers, all brought in from Vienna and manufactured in 1858 and 1859. Incredibly light, though, at just over 650 pounds apiece. But you can imagine in the sweltering heat in the afternoon of July 2nd, as they fired those pieces, they would roll down the ridgeline, and after about the first hour, Edward Porter Alexander would have to go to Barksdale and ask for volunteers to help roll the pieces back into place. And Alexander would actually note that of the 8 volunteers that showed up, 2 of them would be killed and 3 mortally wounded.
Wow. Let me add here, first of all, you're with the American Battlefield Trust. We are covering what I would suggest is the largest attack at Gettysburg. We have to make sure we weigh in with our distinguished panel here. Doug is getting recognized for his fame on the History Channel, that he's all over it in the World War II one right now. You might see Kris and I on there once in a while as well. And we've got people from all over the country coming in. So make sure you share this with your friends. We are doing more of a walking podcast sort of today, but I want to address one elephant in the room here, and that is that, Kris, how many bottles of water are you carrying?
I'm carrying 5.
I have 3 liters in my backpack plus an extra one. Doug, what do you got?
I got 2.
Palmer, what are you carrying? 2. Okay, so don't worry about us. You know, if the camera goes sideways and falls to the ground, well, then you can worry. Until then, we are going to enjoy this view as best we can and stay hydrated. So we are advancing in the footsteps, I would say, Kris, of like the 21st Mississippi. Now, we happen to be walking Barksdale's advance along generally the path of a wartime road called the Wheatfield Road, now called Millerstown or Pumping Station Road. But remember, by the time we're doing this, because of this attack, Hood attacks first, then McLaws attacks, these are divisions, and then Anderson attacks, okay? So it takes about an hour and a half to really get all these guys, you know, making this attack by design. It sort of really helps to reveal a weakness in the Union line. But by the time Barksdale's men are moving forward, and I think you guys know he was chafing to move forward, Hood's division is already attacking Little Round Top and Devil's Den and struggling over the wheat field by the time Barksdale and on his right, Joseph B. Kershaw go in. Kris?
Yeah, so as we're moving along here, first off, if you wonder how hot it is, there's this amazing thing called the weather app. Go click on that. You can see just how hot it is in Gettysburg right now. And as we're moving along here, we're at the 21st Mississippi. This would have been commanded by one of the oldest regimental commanders in the entire Army of Northern Virginia, a guy named Benjamin Humphreys. Humphreys was supposed to graduate in West Point. He was attending with Jefferson Davis, the President of the Confederacy, as well as Robert E. Lee, but he partaked in the 1826 Eggnog Riot.
The legendary.
And he is one of 19 cadets who are dismissed from the academy for getting drunk, assaulting a few of the guards, and these are things you couldn't do. But there are a lot of political ties to the Davis family, the Lee family, and others. And Humphreys alludes to the fact that maybe some others had taken part in this, but daddy or mom or someone else stepped in to allow them to finish at West Point. Nonetheless, Ben Humphreys has earned his reputation as a stout commander at places like Antietam and at 2nd Fredericksburg and 1st Fredericksburg, and is out here. His 480 men of the 21st is heading towards the Peach Orchard. It actually includes his son-in-law, who is the nephew of Jefferson Davis, Isaac Stamps, who's a company commander, actually carrying the sword of Jefferson Davis from the Mexican-American War out here on the battlefield. That man, Isaac Stamps, will fall in the Peach Orchard, shot through the gut and mortally wounded. But as we are moving across here, Doug brought up something that's very important, that as the Mississippians, before they moved, there was a large bombardment. 47 guns from Edward Porter Alexander's battalion will be firing over tops of our heads. We're actually facing towards the northeast. And Alexander's guns, Alexander's not supposed to be in charge out here today. It's supposed to be a guy named James Walton. But Walton's not as good an artillerist as Alexander. How do you jump the chain of command? You leave Walton's battalion over on Hare's Ridge. You bring Alexander forward first. And as he sets up those 47 guns, he's taking on between 54 and 56 Union guns that are placed basically in an L, running along the Emmitsburg Road and then doubling back along the Wheatfield Road. This is a close-in artillery battle. Number one, they're so close that some of the Union 3rd Corps artillery pieces are being hit by canister fire. That's not something you hear happening.
Yeah, again, because they're so close together.
They're so close
together.
together.
You can't shoot far away effectively.
And the cacophony of battle is so loud. And I want to have Palmer turn to the right here towards that little red house. That's the Joseph Sherfy house. Joseph Sherfy will purchase about 50 acres in 1842 in this area. He's a fruit dealer, but in July 2nd of 1863, he and his family, he has 6 children, his wife, his mother-in-law, they all are in the house. They're told to get out. As they get out of the house, his mother-in-law is shot at by a Confederate, and going through her skirt will actually be a bullet that hits her skirt, then hits a post there, she'll pick it up and keep it as a memento, and that memento is in the Adams County Historical Society Gettysburg history.
You know, by the way, if you see Kris just going off, man, if you can't tell, Barksdale's Brigade in this part of the field is one of his jams. So keep rocking, man. Kris and I led a 3-hour tour for American Battlefield Trust members not long ago. And, you know, he just went crazy. And you didn't even say Benjamin Humphrey's awesome middle name.
Grub Humphreys?
Yeah, there you go.
And so that house over there, though, was filled with men from the 114th Pennsylvania, which are known as the Colossus Zouaves. There'll be other skirmishers out here, the 63rd Pennsylvania, Company B of the 2nd New Hampshire, which I'll tell a story about them in a second.
No, hey, while you're this is why a good reason to be out here is one of the houses that's not out here is the Staub Farm.
Yeah.
So
Good point.
as we look out here, you can imagine this fence line. The Staub Farm is out there, and I say out there because we're not exact. There's a different place up on different places on different maps. The 63rd Pennsylvania is out there. When Joseph Kershaw's South Carolina Brigade would go, they would ultimately fall back in the line, and it would be Longstreet, the skirmish line, I'm sorry. The 63rd Pennsylvania would fall back in the line, and Longstreet would actually order members of the 17th Mississippi, who are also acting as skirmishers, to go out and knock down that fence line, because right now it's an obstacle. And when we think about when Barksdale ultimately launches this thunderbolt, it's gonna crash across this field, and that would have slowed them down. So he's trying to think ahead about how this is gonna work. Now, my favorite story about the Staub House is, earlier in the day, Stickles is trying to figure this out. We know some U.S. sharpshooters in the 3rd Maine will go into those far woods. They're going to have a firefight with the Alabama Brigade of Will Cox. And as they finally fall out, there's a First Lieutenant Lewis Allen, a long descendant of Ethan Allen. And so he happens to pick up he's a first sergeant, you know, he's supposed to be out there guiding the thing. He picks up somebody's rifles, he gets so engrossed at shooting at Alabamans that soon he looks around and realizes there's nobody around him. And so rather than come back up the ridgeline like the rest of the unit does, he decides he's just gonna bolt across the field as the Alabamans shoot at him. He's gonna arrive at the Staub House, fall in the front yard, lean back against the wall, and 2 old ladies will come out and they start searching all over to figure out where he's been wounded. When they realize he hasn't been wounded at all, that he's just out of breath, they chastise him for being a wimp in 1863, which means I say to every first sergeant out there ever, hey, once you get up to the top there, it doesn't mean you can give up on your physical fitness program, lest you be shamed by a bunch of old women. And that we certainly have a case of that on July 2nd, 1863.
And what's out here too, what you'll actually be hearing, we couldn't hear anything on July 2nd, 1863. The cannons, the small arms, it is so loud out here that the skirmishers who are in the Sherfy house and up along this line, they're actually running up, and I'm not going to do what I did to Gary the other day and scream right in his ear. They actually have to go, hey, get out, fall back, or move forward. It is so loud out here. It's something that you don't take into consideration.
It's like you're in a bar, but this is a cacophony that's 3 miles wide.
Yes, this is the world's worst bar to be in. But you have that, and the other thing I want to point out, right over in this area would have been the John Wentz property. His son Henry is actually part of the artillery out here and owns a piece of property on this part of the battlefield. According to Tim Smith, he might be the only Confederate to own a piece of property and attack across it here at Gettysburg.
That's a good one.
But the last thing I'll say before I move us into the open, the second New Hampshire, Company B, is faced in this direction. The rest of the 2nd New Hampshire, commanded by 21-year-old Edward Bailey, is facing towards the south. Company B has Sharps rifles and are firing towards us, but they're using a specialized ball that they just picked up in June of 1863 in Washington, known as a musket shell. This thing is an incendiary shell. And it's actually also a high explosive shell. So these things would go into Company B's Sharps rifles. They would fire down range, but they were a mess. These things didn't have the impact that a mini ball would have. It would actually sometimes bounce off of the man. Other times it would hit and not explode like it's supposed to. They called these things nefarious shells. But I had seen a large number of men, or at least a couple, I should say, accounts of men when their cartridge box was hit, exploding. And I couldn't figure out what was going on until I figured out they were using musket shells, explosive shells, and one man had at least 30 rounds blown into the side of him as he died, and these men out here are watching that happen. It was actually this is absolutely a horrible place to be. So we have Alexander with 47 guns. We have the Union line mixed with all kinds of different artillerymen firing in return to the south, out to the west, And now you are caught in the middle if you're with the 63rd, Company B of the 2nd New Hampshire, the 114th Pennsylvania. It's just a mess to be out here in Gary's famous bar, apparently.
Yeah. You know, maybe it wasn't the best, you know, thing to do there, the best analogy, but I'll take it. You know, one of the things, and by the way, we have a glorious breeze in some shade right now, so I will take this, and we're hanging here for a bit while you're with the American Battlefield Trust. We're talking about the large attack at Gettysburg, although at least we'll debate that. I'd like to hear what y'all think about it, but the numbers work in favor of my theory here. You know, a couple of things. First of all, thank you, Michael. Good to see you, Warhawk. A bunch of other people coming on here, and somebody talking about their capstone project on Pickett's Charge. Pretty cool. I just want to show this picture real quick. We're not going to focus in on it. Don't worry, you know the one. It's called the Harvest of Death.
And it was taken right here, right, Gary?
Well, of course, it was taken here, and 75 other places. That's about the number of theories where people have come up with. And somehow some people support multiple theories, which is really interesting, suggesting that the bodies exist in the same place and time in different places. But what Doug said about the Staub farm, roughly 4 of the 75 theories include views that would show the Staub farm, and they don't show up in the picture. So this is a reason to know the battlefield beyond what it looks like today, beyond the famous pictures of elsewhere. You really have to know the battlefield features in order to negate or confirm what we know in photographs and accounts. Of course, it's helpful to know where that fence is that these guys were talking about. And what we got here is 3 people who have about 10 or 20 hours worth of information to do on a 1-hour video in the heat. I think it's time to get moving, guys.
All right.
So like Kris said, we'd be following the 21st Mississippi. Just off to our left or to the north would be the 13th Mississippi. I always find this interesting. You know, if you don't think we fall back on what we're comfortable in time of crisis, Barksdale, when he gives the orders for these Mississippians to launch this attack, will ride around the right of the brigade and get in front of his old regiment, the 13th Mississippi, and they would be the one. And it also gives us an idea of the relative size of these things. 21st Mississippi going to be straddling the road, going to hit the peach orchard. 13th Mississippi going to hit into the Sherfy house and barn. Beyond them, 17th Mississippi, and then 18th Mississippi to the north. So it's a pretty large brigade, 1,600 men. They're going to cross this 500 yards in just about 5 minutes to slam into Graham's brigade. Now, this is part of the Union 3rd Corps. We know the story of Dan Sickles, and he's going to, without orders and without consulting with anyone else, move his corps 3/4 of a mile in front of the rest of the Union line to set up a position that would begin on our right at the Peach Orchard and then extend about 1,400 yards up the Emmitsburg Road. We are headed toward Graham's brigade, only about 1,500 men. One of the big problems of this advanced position is, first of all, there's a salient, a 90-degree bend that could be attacked in 2 positions here at the Peach Orchard. But the other reason is this line is about twice as long for the number of troops he has, which is why Meade's decision when he finally learns this is to keep Sickles in place, because his fear is if the Confederates attack and the Union is on the move, perhaps moving back to where he wanted them in the first place, that could be disaster. So this is when he's going to tap into the 5th Corps. He's going to tap into the artillery reserve. He's going to ask for the 2nd Corps to close the gap to the north. And of course, his last step is to send his chief engineer, Gouverneur K. Warren, up to Little Round Top.
Let's talk about William Barksdale here for a second. We need to talk about motivation on a battlefield.
A little bit more shade here, and then I got something too, Kris. Go
Want
ahead.
to stop here, Gary?
Yeah.
William Barksdale, 41 years young here on the battlefield. Although everyone thinks he's like 65, he looks like Benjamin Franklin in every painting you see about him. He's only 41 years old. He's balding, so he wears a wig at times, but we don't think he has that wig here on at Gettysburg, because at least one account says he's not wearing it. But he is not a West Pointer. He is a politician. He's from Smyrna, Tennessee. Eventually goes to the University of Tennessee, becomes a lawyer, goes to Mississippi, serves in the Mexican-American War in the 2nd Mississippi's regiment, largely in a staff role, but he gets to know the men down there pretty well. And then he, prior to the war, is going to run a pro-slavery, pro-secession newspaper. He goes off to 4 terms in Congress and is actually serving in Congress with Dan Sickles from New York. They vote on some of the same bills together in favor, because they're both Democrats. Now, Barksdale, though, is made famous prior to the war for 2 incidents. First off, that will be the Charles Sumner caning by Preston Brooks, because Barksdale allegedly stands there and holds back other people.
Hey, don't worry, they'll work it out.
Yeah, exactly.
It's okay.
And it's a vicious beating on the floor of Congress. Actually, Sumner's in this school-type chair that's bolted to the ground, and he's being hit so hard it's actually being ripped out of the floor. Then he allegedly gets into a fight or is breaking up a fight in 1858 between a PA politician and himself. He gets into this scrap. His wig falls off. He picks it up, puts it on backwards. Everyone laughs, and they're like, oh, let's stop fighting. He goes off to war, as Doug pointed out, at the head of the 13th Mississippi. But he has been a brigadier general since early 1862 during the 7 Days Campaign. But he fights so well at First Fredericksburg, he is put in the same defense position at Second Fredericksburg. His men will lose the battle flag of the 18th Mississippi, which is down in the Mississippi State Archives. Some of his men will be captured. Barksdale is blamed in the papers a few days after the battle for losing that part of the battlefield by Jubal Early, who was in overall command there. The Confederates won Chancellorsville, but it's this one blight that they have. And in the midst of what becomes the Gettysburg campaign, Early, Barksdale start fighting with each other in the Richmond Enquirer. It gets so bad, Robert E. Lee steps in and says, you two need to knock this off. And so when Barksdale's men come out here, this is vindication for them. Barksdale wants to prove his worth. He wants to show up Jubal Early, show the Confederacy, my brigade is really as good as we have played it out to be. The men of the 18th Mississippi, who are largely captured in the Sunken Road and lost their flag, they're on the flank. They want to do the same thing. And the 21st, all of these guys are really trying to make a statement out here. Barksdale will ride to the center of his brigade, as Doug pointed out, take off his cap, and the only order, according to a few men he would give, is forward, forward. He would just keep going and driving the Yankees that day. His men, his field officers, they're all on foot, but he is on horseback leading from the front, and they call it the most magnificent charge ever. To close off, his brigade is going to hit this peach orchard like an L, like a closing vice. So we have the 21st coming up in our area, and they're going to start to swing in, utilizing some South Carolinians who are to the south of us under Joseph Kershaw. The other three regiments are initially going to hit along the Emmitsburg Road and then start making their way north. So it's going to be this brigade, and it's going to start right in the sector that is going to dislodge the salient position that is Dan Sickles.
Good. All one sentence, Kris. I love it. Again, you're with the American Battlefield Trust. We're here with Palmer and Doug and Kris. We're getting some shade here. We got a nice little breeze here, and we are covering the largest charge at Gettysburg, July 2nd, the afternoon, the charge of Hood, McLaws, and part of Richard Anderson's division. And that is, by the way, 15,900 men by my count, using Busey and Martin's tabulations. And against, because George Meade sends more than 15,000 soldiers over there, against about 41,000 Union soldiers in the end available for it. In other words, every Confederate brigade, Barksdale, Kershaw, Law, is on average facing a Union division 2.5 times its size, okay? I also want to say that I will bless a harvest of death theory, once I find one that does only two things, as William Fresnito laid out, that it match known 1863 features, and that it's a terrain match in both directions of those photographs. It's that simple. And in my strongest opinion, none of them has done that, okay? People are very easily convinced of these things. In addition, thanks to our colleague Anna Grace for the kind words, watching a live stream here at the American Battlefield Trust headquarters. And I have a bunch of other people I'd like to thank, but we got to keep moving. I want to challenge everybody here, Doug, Kris, and I, to answer one of the viewer requests, okay? It looks like Kris got something important to say here, but I'm going to keep going here.
Why do you have your AAA card out?
Yeah. During this, my wife needs to know our AAA, and that tells me there might be something going on. So I am going to photograph this thing as soon as I'm done asking this question. Somebody asked, what happens if you got 30 seconds each? What happens if Longstreet attacks before Sickles moves out? Doug Douds.
Yeah, so this is an interesting one, because this is one of the things that Sickles gets credit for after the fact, which is to say he puts defense in depth to the weakest part of the Union line. In which case, that would mean that Longstreet would strike when Sickles was back where Meade wanted him to be in the first place. In which case, I say we open up the variables of all things that could have possibly happened. It would have been easier to get reinforcements over to the other line. It would have been a longer way for the Confederates to get over there. So I don't know that this appreciably changes the outcome of how this happens. And oh, by the way, if Longstreet goes earlier, he's short. Right? Because he's going to be short of Vanderlaw's brigade, whom he waited for to get here. So It would have been an understrength attack, and they would have had to go further, closer to the Union lines, easier to support. I don't think it changes the outcome.
All right, Kris, looks like he's up.
I think the big question is, where is Sickles? Does he put his guys where Meade told him to? If he does, and Lafayette McLaws follows his attack plan, he goes right down this road, he deploys to the north, and he goes straight north, basically up the Emmitsburg Road, exposes his right flank to Dan Sickles if he's in the right place, and then now has to meet the enemy in that area. As Doug pointed out, we have interior lines for the Union. That's going to allow us to bring more reinforcements into the fray, and that is something that I think most people don't take into consideration. Yeah, this is one of the grandest charges ever. Yes, this is some of the best 3 hours of fighting by any soldiers on any battlefield, but there's no reinforcements. There's no follow-up force for the Confederates. On the Union side, this road is basically a fire hydrant of blue soldiers. The Wheatfield Road, which is just beyond us, will keep spewing soldiers from the 2nd Corps, the 5th Corps, the 6th Corps down into this area. Plus, we'll have the 12th Corps coming in, the 1st Corps. It's just going to be a disaster either way. Would they have lost fewer men with him not moving? We don't know, but that is what a lot of Meade enthusiasts think.
Good. That was 29 seconds. We are joined by yet another American Battlefield Trust staffer watching here. Now we got our former chairman actually here with us. He's not going to come on camera here, but really good to see him as well. So, my answer is similar to what these guys say. I think that the way the Union defense worked and how the troops themselves performed, and especially how George Gordon Meade was willing to move troops back and forth and use his fishhook, it would have been no different in the result for the Confederates. In fact, I think it might have been worse for the Confederates. Sure, maybe they'd have taken the Peach Orchard without a fight, but they no doubt would have still tried to break through a Union line that was much more compact if, as Kris says, Sickles went where he was supposed to go. So I think no different main outcome and probably worse for the Confederates. You're at the American Battlefield Trust. We're going to keep walking again here.
Yeah, so we're heading due east right now. We're heading right towards the famous Peach Orchard. The Peach Orchard itself was about 10 acres in total. We would have had acreage on the south side of the Wheatfield Road here at the intersection of the Emmitsburg Road. That red car turning to the right is heading south along the Emmitsburg Road, a wartime road. And then if you would go to the left of this stop sign up where we're going to go across here, you might see some trees. That would have been the other part of the famous Peach Orchard. Joseph Scherfy, the name was actually Scherfrig, and then it was changed to Scherfy over time, was born just to the south of us on what becomes the George Rose property. And then he comes up here in 1842, purchases about 50 acres in this area, establishes his home. You put it over my left shoulder over there.
Beautiful view too, man.
That's the Scherfy barn. That's the third Scherfy barn that was here at the time. The first one burns on July 3rd, 1863. The second one on July 4th, 1866. And then it is rebuilt for the third time. And then beyond it is the Scherfy home, which is mostly original and will be the central location for the 114th Pennsylvania, 57th Pennsylvania, and 105th Pennsylvania, holding back the left end of Barksdale's line, including the 13th and 18th Mississippi up in that range. And I should mention, Barksdale's brigade will sustain the highest number of casualties, 49%. They will lose 3 of their 4 regimental commanders in this attack as they come across here. That's the ferocity that they're showing. So we're actually turning right here towards the south into the famous Peach Orchard. These trees were replanted around 2008. So this will give you an idea of what they would look like. At the time, it takes about 10 to 12 years for these trees to mature to start producing fruit. And as I like to say, if you want to know what type of peach trees these are, I'm a historian. I know 3 types of trees: living, dead, and Christmas. There's no lights on these trees, and they're green. So they're not Christmas trees, but they are living.
Kris is going all horticultural on us here. Now, when we crest the ridge and can see more, I want to talk more about Hood's attack, but I suspect Doug's got something going on here.
Well, no, so I think this is really interesting when we get here. If we look just back over to the west, so if you pan to the right, you see 2 pieces of artillery facing to the west. Back behind us, we see artillery facing to the south. And this is the problem with the salient. This is the problem with the Peach Orchard. It can be attacked in 2 different directions. And oftentimes when we talk about all the Union artillery, 26 pieces of Union artillery brought from the artillery reserve. Remember, the Army of the Potomac has an artillery reserve, 118 pieces of artillery. 32% of the artillery of the Army of the Potomac exists in an organization that is controlled by the Army commander. It's not tied to any unit that Meade can put wherever he wants to put or mass his fires. And when he realizes Sickles is out here, he's going to tap into the artillery reserve. Freeman McGilvery will bring his artillery brigade out here. That's the 26 pieces of artillery. But when you get out here, often people are stunned of, why is all that artillery facing to the south? Well, as we imagine the attack, we're going to go look across. As we look to the south, Garry brought up the idea of Hood's division is the one who starts this thing. all of this artillery is firing down the long axis of that initial part of the attack. That's what they see first. So that's what they are able to target. And of course, it will do massive amounts of mischief. Less into Law's division, some for Anderson's Arkansans and Texans. And then the guy who really takes the brunt of this is going to be Joseph Kershaw's South Carolina Brigade. Because as we exit out of the southeastern corner of the peach orchard, you can see the Rose Farm. In fact, you can imagine now long lines of South Carolinians marching from your right to your left, and all the Union artillery along the Wheatfield Road or the Millerstown Road is firing canister. And Joseph Kershaw will say he's forever haunted by the sound of canister balls bouncing off the stone house and stone barn.
And something hitting the bell, right, too?
Yeah, they're
Kris,
actually
you got
hitting
something quick, because I got stuff.
Yeah, they're hitting the bell down there, and it's something that both Union and Confederate soldiers talk about. They could hear the ringing of the bell. But off to our left, this would have been a wartime, these aren't the trees that would have been there, but this would have been a wartime small orchard. We'd have had at least 2 guns pushed forward here at Patrick Hart's 15th New York. We would be down along a line. They consist of 4 different regiments from 4 different brigades in the 3rd Corps of the Union Army. That is going to kill your command and control. But looking towards the south, what you would actually be looking at would be 5 regiments of South Carolinians coming across here. Joseph Kershaw, he's moving across here. The 3rd and 7th are going to head over towards those trees. That's the Stony Hill towards the wheat field. His other 3 are going to turn towards us. And as they turn towards us, they're going to start coming in from the south to the north towards the peach orchard. And as they do that, there's a miscommunication. The Confederates are coming this way, and then all of a sudden by the right flank, and they all go that way. And the Union artillerists and infantrymen pour into their flank. Then they refront, and then they start moving in this direction. So that's what's supporting Barksdale to the south, Joseph Kershaw and his South Carolinians, or we could say Barksdale is supporting them.
You know, you don't hear this much, but I'm going to pull both a George McClellan and a Kris White. I'm going to take the camera from Palmer. I'm going to let him...
I'm very insulted to have my name.
Hold on, wait, this is a good thing. I'm going to let him get some water, and then I'm going to grab the camera and narrate for a bit, because like Kris White and like McClellan, I'm saying I can do it all. Okay, so here we go. We are looking generally southward, a little bit southwestward here across the Emmitsburg Road. Off in the distance there, we're talking about, Hood's, division really attacking from that ridge, Seminary Ridge further to the left. That's Warfield's Ridge. And you've got Laws's guys, Alabamians in front somewhat over there. And you've got Robertson's Texans and Arkansans over there with, again, Benning and Anderson's Georges behind them. Those guys launched that attack past, beyond the Rose Farm there. And they're going to end up, some are going to end up climbing big round top that you might be able to see sticking up pointy above the trees over there. Some of them are going to end up at Devil's Den, which is in those trees there, and some are going to go to Little Round Top over there, and many are going to fight to the wheat field, which is right over there. So while Kershaw and Barksdale and Semmes and Wofford are attacking, from the Rose Farm to the north, you've got this other massive attack of 7,000 Confederates attacking in that way. Now, if we come over here this way, we can't see it right now, but beyond all of McLaws's guys, then you've also got, we may as well start walking again, you've also got Richard Anderson's 3 brigades, really. So this is an attack that goes from Warfield's Ridge all the way to the field of Pickett's charge with Ambrose Wright or Rand's Wright's Georgians. Guys, does anybody want to argue about the prospect that this is the largest attack at Gettysburg? I'm going to talk a little bit more here. We fight about this, but I know that Pickett's charge is overdone. Pickett's charge is maybe in the top 10 greatest charges of the Civil War. When you think about places like the Wilderness and Second Manassas and Gaines's Mill, Franklin, they're all much larger than Pickett's charge, but Pickett's charge gets all this fame and whatnot. But let's talk about Gettysburg. Does anybody disagree that the second day is the largest charge at Gettysburg?
I want to give Doug the opportunity to do so, but before we do so, Palmer, just stop for 1 second. I want to take in all these trees. Just go pan around here. The Union Army has a problem here. This is a little bit confusing because all the monuments that are up along the Wheatfield Road, many of the Union units will actually move through the peach orchard to get into the open to have a clear field of fire, move down to what is Birney Avenue. We'll have the 3rd Michigan down off to our left. We'll have the 3rd Maine in here, 68th Pennsylvania, which will unbuckle the line, the 2nd New Hampshire, but they would move through here to get a more clear field of fire. That's why we came down to this area. So if you come into the peach orchard, it's a little confusing. You have all these monuments up there, and yes, we did pass Thompson's Pennsylvania battery there. They do move down in there for a reason. So Doug?
No, it's a really good point about the microtrain. So I'll pick up with Gary's assertion.
Challenge.
I totally agree with him. This is the largest attack they put together. Moreover, not only by number, but if you think about the freshness of the troops that are available. When we talk about Longstreet's Corps, we say they're fresh here at Gettysburg. Remember, they didn't fight at Chancellorsville either. So when we think about the best punch Robert E. Lee throws during the Battle of Gettysburg, it is his freshest troops in his one untouched corps under James Longstreet. So think about this. When Lafayette McLaws and John Bell Hood go together, every brigade that's in those divisions have fought in other battles together. They're experienced. They trust one another. And with that whole trust thing, right, speed goes up, cost goes down. This is now the best punch Lee throws, not just by numbers, but when you think about experienced troops and how fresh they are. I agree with them.
And I absolutely agree with Doug and with Gary. And to add to the point, Longstreet is often thought about as a defensive commander. He is good on the defensive. Of course, we see First Fredericksburg there. But look at Gaines's Mill, where he helped support Stonewall Jackson. And then we have to look at Second Manassas. He goes in there. What an assault. And then here.
And the Wilderness here.
The Wilderness is an awesome story there. It's one of my favorite stories to tell on any battlefield. But here he is going to land a punch with 14,000-ish Confederates, then supported by Anderson, and he is going to unravel a line of the Union 3rd Army Corps, the 5th Army Corps, the 2nd Corps, and it is going to take all the strength and all of the endurance of that Union Army working together, and they worked really well together. I don't want to take anything away from them, to come here and stop those 14,000 Confederates. So it's not always Stonewall Jackson making an assault.
Yeah, and note that you talked about 3 Union Corps, but Meade scrambles 2 more. Most of the 6th Corps, or a good portion of it, is on this side. Then you've got a good amount of the 12th Corps, coming over here as well. So, man, even despite the 3 hours fighting, best 3 hour fighting, Meade is making sure that that doesn't matter.
Hey, this is, I think, to Chris's point earlier, too, we were on the other side of the peach orchard. And so it's interesting when we're talking about this bombardment that we said for 45 minutes, this whole idea of if you're Union troops and you're out here, you're trying to avoid, imagine all the Confederate overshoots are overshooting the peach orchard and landing amongst this artillery line. To Chris's point, he brought up the 2nd New Hampshire. They're actually oriented to the south behind the Wentz house trying to find some cover. Moreover, for Henry Cable's battalion that's to the south, all the Union troops that are over here are trying to find some cover and concealment, which is why they have to move forward, because we have this intervisibility line. It's the micro terrain that makes this whole place work, and you don't really get to see it because it doesn't show up on a contour map. But when you walk the ground, now you do, and you go, oh, now I understand why they are where they are.
And let's talk about microterrain right here. We didn't even plan this. This is the 15th New York Battery. This is Patrick Hart's battery, 4 Napoleons, stationed not where the monument is. Remember, this is where they entered the battle along their main battle line. 2 guns would have been pushed past Palmer about 100 yards towards the south. And they would have been commanded by this guy here, although it's not supposed to look anything like him according to monument regulations. So this looks nothing like Lieutenant Edward Knox, who's in charge of one of the sections of Patrick Hart's gun.
Oh, look.
And
oh
here
God.
is
Doug's
got Edward Knox.
Moment.
So no mustache and little goatee, but he looks, according to the guys, they said this looked like him. But Knox is an amazing story. He has his guns forwarding. Joseph Kershaw is coming up from the south. We have the 21st Mississippi adding their weight to them, and these Confederates are coming towards these 2 guns, and Knox comes up with a novel plan. Load your guns with double canister fire it, guys. They fire it out, and then what's he tells them? He doesn't tell them to run. He doesn't tell them to charge. He says, lie down and play dead. That's what they do. And the Confederates charge right over top of them. He tells his men, rise up. It's like a reenactment. And they get up, they pick their guns up, and they get off the field. Because he knew that if the Confederates would seize this position, that the Confederates wouldn't worry about taking the guns, turning them on them all right away, and they wouldn't worry about all the wounded. They would keep going for that kill, land that killing blow. And for his actions out here, Edward Knox saves his guns and is a Medal of Honor recipient here out in the wheat field. Or, I'm sorry, in the peach orchard. 1 of 2. The other one was earned by a man up in Hampton's Battery, Casper Carlisle from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
You're with the American Battlefield Trust. It is warm out, but man, we are, psyched to be here and be able to relate these stories. Make sure you share this with your friends as we walk around and talk about the largest attack at Gettysburg here. Man, I'm seeing Michigan. I'm seeing Illinois. I'm from Illinois. I got my undergrad in Michigan, not at Ann Arbor. And I'm seeing all sorts of friends on here, so it's great to hear from you. And thank you to Peter, by the way, and a bunch of other people here, too. I think we're ready to keep walking, and I sense that Doug's got something to say.
Well, no, I always just like Chris pointed out, a recipient of the Medal of Honor. If ever you wonder why you can create a monument that shows your swagger 163 years later, go ahead and come up with a novel idea in the midst of an attack that overruns your position. Save all your people and your artillery pieces. You get to go ahead and stand like that for all of eternity.
That's pretty impressive. I love that, Doug. So we're actually moving south here. We're going along we're going east along the Wheatfield Road. This was a wartime road. Of course, it was not asphalt at the time. And if you laugh, yes, people will ask us that question. As we're going down along here, we're actually going to cut left here shortly and head off towards the Trossel Farm. But this is leading off towards the north side of Little Round Top. If you follow the Wheatfield Road, this will also lead you into the Wheatfield itself, hence the name. And this would be the main area where the Union soldiers are starting to arrive onto the field. Some of them will cut cross country off to our left. That'll be the 1st Division of the 2nd Corps, John Caldwell's guys, 4 brigades strong, heading towards the Wheatfield. That'll also be some other action we'll talk about here shortly. And then, of course, you have Little Round Top out in front of us. This line that we're going down along, this would have been consisting of Freeman McGilvery's batteries of the Artillery Reserve. Freeman McGilvery was a seaman prior to the war. He's from Maine. I have heard it challenged that he was the most effective Maine soldier on the battlefield here.
Hold on. Well, as another Mainer said, or as one Mainer said, isn't it all the slats in the fence that keep the pigs out of the garden?
Yeah.
You know, there's room enough for credit for all, I guess, according to this individual.
And down there would be the guns of Charles Phillips, 5th Massachusetts Battery, as well as the 6 guns, Napoleons of John Bigelow. His guns, John Bigelow, 22 years young, Harvard, almost graduate, goes off to war in his senior year to take over the 9th. As we're going across this field, we're actually on the reverse slope of what is a small ridge line. The Peach Orchard is off to our left. The John Wentz Farm is off to our left, as well as the Joseph Sherpy Farm. But this area actually sees action. And to our front, you might see a large mini ball. That is the monument to the 7th New Jersey. Their colonel, who is sent into here with his regiment, the 7th New Jersey, George Burling's brigade, and we should talk about the command and control in a minute, Doug.
Yeah.
They're going to come into this area, and allegedly that is where Louis Francine, their colonel, is wounded in the leg. They are wounded in the leg, and Francine will go down. We're going to go to the right. That's the other monument there. There you go. Louis Francine is wounded. He thought he's going to survive. They have to amputate his leg, but he's evacuated to Philadelphia, where he dies a few weeks after the battle. And
I want to stop here for a reason, man.
and that monument was placed there. We're all over the place.
Yeah, we are indeed.
All right. Turn right there. And that monument was placed where Francine allegedly fell out in this field. But this is a key terrain feature where we are. We're behind a line. We don't know what's coming over the ridge line behind the camera. That will be the 21st as well as the 17th Mississippi bearing down on us. And there are some Union regiments, the 7th New Jersey, the 73rd New York, which we'll see their monument here as we walk along, who are thrown in behind here and all of a sudden have to stop this tidal wave of Confederates. And there was one unit that was called in action, the 141st Pennsylvania. We passed their monument, commanded by Henry Medill. Medill will claim he lost the highest number of casualties on this part of the battlefield. 70% of his men. He carries 209 men into action, loses 151 of them. And when Dan Sickles rides up to him and says, stop these men, you got to stop these Confederates, he will turn to him, Colonel Medill will, and say, where are my men? It's very much that Pickett's charge moment. Where is my division, General Lee?
I have no division. Chris, you drinking enough water, man?
I am.
Making sure that you are. Could you take a few steps over here? I want to speak to the complexity of it, and then maybe Doug wants to talk about this New Jersey Brigade or whatever he wants to say. But I just want to say that we talk about, the 3rd Corps and then the 5th and, the 2nd supporting them. But the 6th Corps, the one that was the furthest away, that marched the furthest to get here on the Union side, marched from Manchester, and the advanced elements are sent to help bail out Sickles' movement as well. And one of those units is the 139th Pennsylvania. Now, you see that monument behind the camera over there, and here it is. For those of you who like to line it up, you can see Big Round Top still sticking up above the trees. You see that the trees behind it have grown, but they're still in the same spot, if you'd like to. I point this out because this monument used to sit in the Valley of Death, where they actually charged the Confederates and helped push back, we think, elements of Wofford's brigade. helping to recapture a battery of the 3rd Massachusetts battery under Aaron Walcott. So these guys did their service over there. They put up this monument, and then later, after they did, the state of Pennsylvania awarded funds to put up monuments, $1,500 per unit, and $1,500 bought a much nicer one than that. So they moved that monument here and put up a much taller monument over where they performed their other deeds. This one marking where they came later in the fight, I believe on July 3rd, as they pushed Confederates out of this area.
And that's a good point, Gary, and I want to turn it over to Doug in a second to talk about command and control out here. But Palmer, if you look off in this direction, up in the corner of the wheat field, that would be the northeastern corner of the wheat field. That's where the 141st Pennsylvania Monument is situated. Sorry, Peach Orchard. That's where the northeast corner there. That's the 141st Pennsylvania Monument, but their flank markers were moved numerous times because of the road systems and other things. Monuments were moved on these battlefields, and not always for nefarious purposes. Sometimes they were placed in the wrong spot. Sometimes the veterans would argue with each other. The 9th Massachusetts men come out here 3 separate times to talk about where should we put this monument, and think about being out here under the stressor of battle for the first time ever in a foreign land, essentially, to you, being shot at, and now you're like, yeah, we were right exactly over there. Oh, and we came back 50 years later, and nothing's ever changed, right? 50 years.
Perfect memory among people, too.
Precisely. So the monuments over time would be moved due to the park roads, the trolley system down here. Sometimes units get into a fight. It shouldn't be here, it should be there. So it's not always for nefarious purposes where people think that monuments are moved.
All right, let's keep walking as Doug takes over here.
Yeah, hey, we're passing Clark's battery. So Clark's battery is going to claim to have fired 1,342 rounds on July 2nd, 1863.
You just had that in your head, right?
I just happened to pull that one out. And the question about this one is that the most rounds fired by any battery?
I'll tell you what, Smith's
in a
battery
single
at
day.
Devil's Den keeps talking about it, and their total is 240. So, I mean, so we talk about that, and that gives you an idea of the rate of fire and the length of duration of that fire. So I don't know of a higher one, Chris.
I have the final say on this. I came out to this monument about 15 years ago. There was a little American flag with that number on it right beside Clark's, and it said most shells fired by a battery ever, and that American flag said it, so America.
Okay. It's America 250, so it sounds like it all works.
Swear to God, it was out here, and I wish I had a picture of it.
So when we think about this idea too, so we were talking about the Union setup of, hey, this is going to be David Bell Birney's division is going to be from Devil's Den through the wheat field up here to the peach orchard, and it extends to the north. This is going to be Humphrey's division. Now, what they're going to do is they recognize this is an exposed position, so they're going to pull brigades back. Burling's brigade. When Kris talks about the 7th New Jersey, it's the idea that they're going to be the reserve just in case something bad happens in front of them. The way it unfolds is Burling's brigade is going to be pulled apart to all different parts of the field. Kris mentions the 7th New Jersey, the 2nd New Hampshire are also part of Burlington. So we're going to end up with multiple units spread out all over to the point where you're going to have a brigade commander who has no touch to any of his regiments because they are piecemealing them out. And you should picture the little Dutch boy putting his finger in the dam to try and keep this whole thing from breaking up, because that's how these regiments get used.
Yeah, and we're looking at the rear side of the 73rd New York Monument. It's another brigade that's being parceled out to come down here and try to rob Peter to pay Paul. And they come up into this terrible position and basically are down here for just a few moments whenever Barksdale's wave comes right up over and top of us. To the right of them, you would have had the 114th Pennsylvania, the Collis's Zouaves. They're out here on the battlefield, and to the fences that we talked about earlier, there's half of a fence up, half of a fence down, which is going to break up their regiment as they advance onto the field. And then we'll also have the 105th and 57th Pennsylvania up in that vicinity.
And we hope you're following along on your maps. Use your American Battlefield Trust maps at battlefields.org. Look at your maps of the Eastern Theater by the American Battlefield Trust. Look at our Gettysburg campaign book of maps, all of which are available at battlefields.org. Go ahead.
So what's happening is from the camera left, which is out to the west, the Confederates are coming on about a 45-ish degree angle towards us. They're starting to come across this field, not directly towards us anymore. They're starting to angle to the left.
And this is all Mississippians still,
all
right?
Mississippians. They're angry. They're ready to go. You know, they're hot out here. But though for Mississippians, it's probably like a winter's day.
It's positively beautiful.
But we would be seeing these men coming across here. We would see William Barksdale in and amongst the Sherfy farm buildings. And he is pressing his men, screaming, forward, forward. Along the Emmitsburg Road, we'll go down the colonel of the 17th Mississippi, the 13th Mississippi, James Carter, 30 years old farmer, shot through the head, killed out here on the battlefield. And then as they keep pressing forward, these Mississippians will somehow break into two pieces. One is going to our right. That's the 21st Mississippi under Benjamin Humphreys. They're going to the barn off to our right. That's the Trossel Farm building, supported by some of the Kershaw's South Carolinians that are still in the fight. They're going to try to take out 6 guns of John Bigelow's 9th Massachusetts battery, who are falling back by recoil and prolong to the field to our right. They're also bouncing a solid shot across that field, trying to slow down those men, but the South Carolinians and Mississippians are coming towards them. Then off to our left, we have those other 3 regiments of Mississippi. They're dislodging Dan Sickles' line. One regiment pulls out the 68th Pennsylvania, and that will unhinge the salient point, and that is what's going to unhinge this line. To the north of us, Doug talked about Andrew Humphreys. We would see his division, according to Andrew Humphreys, the bow-legged, profane little man, according to Gordon Ray, falling back and stopping, according to him, 20 times to stop, about face, fire at the Confederates, and try to slow them down. And by doing so, he will lose nearly 1/2 of his division here at Gettysburg.
You know, we've got so many people on here. We've got more than 700 people watching, for which we thank you. Thanks for sharing this around so many people can engage with this history. We always like to hear, and we know you're going to tell us what you like about these live streams and what you wish we could improve. You know, we've got somebody named Mr. Awesome 2K, humble man, but we're happy to have you here, and really happy to have our friend Tim York on here enjoying our live streams. I think we're going straight, guys. Is that what we're doing?
Yep, sounds
so
good.
I think we spend a lot of time, and Kris just talked about the Trossel Farm. You could imagine Dan Sickles getting wounded to the left of the barn over there, badly wounded. Somebody asked whether he had to have his leg amputated or whether it was like something to get attention or to help his case. My understanding is that it was dangling by skin after the shell struck it direct. It didn't land near it. Let's see if Kris has anything to disagree about that. I think it had to come off. Kris?
So according to Dan Sickles, he's down there by that Trossel Farm, just south or just to the east of where we are right now, and he's on his horse, and an artillery shell, a solid shot, comes in and strikes him in the leg. He doesn't feel it, he says. And I've heard some strange things from men who are wounded in war, and I can tend to believe this from Dan Sickles.
Albert Sidney Johnston.
Yeah, I've heard some really strange stories, but Sickles will be taken to the rear, and eventually he will go to Thomas Sims, who's the assistant surgeon of the 3rd Army Corps, and Sims amputates his leg. Sims is a qualified surgeon. Now, in the melee that happens after the Battle of Gettysburg, and I don't mean an actual battle, I mean the fight between George Gordon Meade's corner and Dan Sickles' corner, it turns ugly. And Alexander Webb, who earns his Medal of Honor over at the Angle on July 3rd, 1863, will claim in post-war years that Dan Sickles' leg didn't have to be amputated, and that he went to the hospital and the doctor said, no, it's fine. And he found a surgeon, a drunk volunteer surgeon, who he had hack off his leg. So it's not that Dan Sickles' leg didn't need to be amputated. It did. It even falls into the pantheon of the fact that these guys can't get along with each other even after the war.
Even when they win.
Yeah, even when they win.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, and if you look at his shattered, you know, we have pictures of his leg. It's shattered. The bone is shattered. These are absolute qualifications.
And so people watching have gone and seen those bones because Sickles requested those bones be soaked in alcohol.
Well, and if you're
maybe it's a drunken volunteer chopping through his bones.
And if it's Dan Sickles, that's no ordinary leg. So we should definitely keep it. So, hey, we're walking out to Humphreys Line, and I think this is a really important when we get out here. Because what you start to see again, the micro-terrain, think about during the artillery bombardment with the infantry laying out here on this side. Now, as we look at this, we're looking at the Emmitsburg Road off to our left or to the west. So when Sickles comes out here, look, this is high ground. Some people call this the Emmitsburg Road Ridge, but it is. It's a high, if you're going from the Emmitsburg Road, you're going to go down to get to the Confederate line, you're going to go down to get to the Union line. So imagine now, during the artillery bombardment, yep, the Union has skirmishers out forward, that makes sense. But where are all these infantry regiments lying? They're laying on the backside and defilade on the other side of the field. Remember, everything on a mobile battlefield is a direct fire weapon. I mean, unless you get into a siege and then you can bring in mortars and those kinds of things. So there's protection on this side of the road. It's once the Confederate attacks start, And Kris did a great job about talking how Barksdale's Mississippi Brigade wheels to the north. You can see what is the dilemma for all the Union soldiers that are out here. They're facing the next part of the Confederate attacks. Men from Alabama, men from Florida, men from Georgia. They're coming directly at them from the west when you got a bunch of Mississippians rolling up your flank from the south, and that doesn't work. And that is why Barksdale's Mississippi Brigade and its attack into the peach orchard is literally the lightning bolt that shatters this advanced position, and now we'll start to tear it down piece by piece.
And I think that's great. You went exactly where I wanted to go, Doug. So thanks for setting all that up here. It's interesting that if you're on the Confederate line, when you're on West Confederate Avenue, you would see Wilcox's large brigade plaque. But for some brigades, not all of them, you get these advanced plaques. There's one to the Texans at Devil's Den. And here we've got Wilcox's guys. So let's set this up a little bit more. You know, Wilcox's guys, the Alabamians, they're the ones who arrive on, you know, the evening of July 1st. And on around noon on July 2nd, the Union detail, the 3rd Maine and the U.S. sharpshooters, are all the way over on Seminary Ridge looking to see where the enemy is, and they bump into, you know, Wilcox's brigade, and there's some particular elements of that. So Wilcox will take position over there. The Floridians under Lang, just 3 regiments, smallest brigade in the Confederate Army here at Gettysburg, are on that side of them. And then Rand's Right's Georgians are beyond them. And beyond them is sort of like Carnot Posey's Mississippians are supposed to attack. And that, you know, Billy Mahone is like, well, you're from Virginia, you don't have to attack at all, or something like that. It's kind of baffling what happens there. And there the attack ends. That was not the design. This attack was supposed to be even much larger. It was supposed to go to Rhodes's division, maybe even Pender's division that fought on the first day as well, and then all the way over to East Cemetery Hill where Early attacks and Johnson attacks Culp's Hill. So this was supposed to be a 7-division attack, and in the end you've really got 2.5 plus 1.5 really making this assault, okay? And this is one of the most fascinating parts of the fight in our podcast last night. I think this is the overlooked part of the battlefield, Humphreys versus Wilcox and Lang, because that brings in the 2nd Corps that is also trying to stave off this assault. And Kris is walking up. I see he's got something.
Yeah, so I have 3 quick things. First off, I was pointing out to Doug on the Confederate line when we started that there's usually a plaque that would be on top of here that would say Army of Northern Virginia, and on the back side of it would say Chattanooga, Tennessee, because these are all actually produced in Chattanooga, Tennessee for the early War Department markers. Wilcox's brigade, this goes back to our motivation. We talked about motivation, and the motivation itself. Can you get his mic off of him, please? The motivation itself is that they were at the Battle of Second Fredericksburg prior to here. They fought really well. This beautiful delaying action back to the Salem Church. Cadmus Wilcox is a brigadier general, and he thinks he's going to get a 2nd star for it, and he doesn't. He's upset about not getting that 2nd star. So whenever he comes out here, he's known as Old Billy Fix, West Point graduate of the class of 1846. He's in everybody's weddings prior to the war. If you look at him, he's in Darius Couch's, James Longstreet, Ulysses S. Grant. This dude, it was loved by everybody. He's out here in a straw hat, short coat. But he has motivation out here because he wants that 2nd star. And Lee even referred to him as one of his oldest brigadiers, meaning he's an older brigadier general. But he will eventually get that 2nd star. Another interesting point that Garry brought up is that we will have this brigade of Alabamians, about 1,600 of them going across the field. They'll meet with the 1st Minnesota. And then there you have the next one over there will be the David Lang's Floridians, which is undersized, a little more than 780 men here on the battlefield. Then you will pick that up with Rand's Right. Only 3 of the 5 brigades of Anderson's division attacks here. If you look back at the Battle of Banks's Ford, which is on May 3rd and 4th, 1863, part of Chancellorsville, in the official report, Jubal Early complains that Richard Anderson did not have control of his division and only deployed 2 of his 5 brigades. He's doing the same exact thing that he did a few months earlier. Cadmus Wilcox is so angry at his division commander here, Richard Heron Anderson, South Carolinian, that he claims he never crossed this Emmitsburg Road, and he basically calls him a coward for not coming forward with Lang's Floridians and Wilcox's Alabamians. So think about your motivation out here on the battlefield. There's many, many factors. But for Cadmus Wilcox, he is upset with his boss, and he's upset with his boss's boss.
I think Doug's up next, but I think that, yes, you know, somebody asked Kris, is that plaque hot?
No, not at all.
Yes,
Black iron out.
I can't figure it out.
Yeah.
You're with the American Battlefield Trust, and, you know, apparently some people in the feed want me to start drinking before noon, which I find pretty interesting here. I hardly drink at all, let alone before noon. My God, that would be a little bit crazy, but I did have 1/5 coffee, 1/5 caffeine coffee this morning. So I know that's fascinating and why you've come onto this feed here. I think we're going to take a path, if there is one, up toward the Klingel house.
There is.
Doug, what do you got?
No,
man?
I want to go back to a little bit to what Kris was saying about, hey, how Garry lined up. Here's what the attack is supposed to be, but why does it break down? After the battle, Robert E. Lee writes, except for a proper concert of action, we would have been successful,
Nice.
which is a massive understatement. Because where does the breakdown happen? Where it always happens, on the gaps and seams. Kris said we got a division commander who perhaps doesn't have control of his division. So when it gets to an next brigade and we give somebody one brigade to the next, there is a seam there. If the division commander doesn't have control of his division, well, then that would be the corps commander's responsibility to fix it. Of course, we know in the afternoon of July 2nd, 1863, A.P. Hill, in his standard position here at Gettysburg, is sick, not available to be out on the field. Lee thinks he should be able to take care of it. So the command and control that breaks down, which is to say how this attack should have continued to unfold. There shouldn't have been the discretion for a brigade commander to go, no, I understand the last 9 brigades over the last 3 hours to the south of me have gone, but I should not go. That should be beyond their discretion. So
Yes.
I would argue that this is a command and control problem as much as anything, and there is that proper concert of action or harmony that falls apart.
I'd like to add one thing onto this. Remember how I've made a big deal about Longstreet having a brigade in the front with a support brigade behind it. When you get over to Anderson's division, either by his own design or by the amount of ground he has to cover, his guys are side by side without that extra punch behind him. So if those gaps and seams do create, and we know that one of Wilcox's guys, I think it's the 8th Alabama, go way errant, and they're not even remotely connected. They're closer to Barksdale's guys. So there's all these things going on at once. And, and it's certainly the wheels start to come off with Anderson, and then it never continues further to the north, which would have really pressed the Union Army.
Which begs the question, where is A.P. Hill? For all of you who want to bust on Richard Ewell about not taking a Hill, and Ewell who marched to the sounds of the guns to a battle that Hill started and didn't know he started and couldn't report back to Robert E. Lee about what was happening to his front. Where is A.P. Hill out here to do his part in the assault? We talk a lot about Dan Sickles. Oh, look what Dan Sickles did. He moved forward against orders, all this. But a lot of people bust on James Longstreet for actually following his order.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Even though he doesn't like this attack plan, he goes in full bore, does his job, but unfortunately, the next piece of the puzzle doesn't step up. And we can see it at the brigade level, complaining about their boss not stepping up, but nobody seems to ever talk about where is A.P. Hill.
I agree. And let me just say that Palmer was focusing in on some of the preservation work you saw to the Klingel House. That is an original structure. We really hope that a year from now, you'll be able to see a restored and, and safe from, further decay Klingel farm here. Now, we've got New Hampshire up here, we've got New Jersey up here, and I know that we're going to probably terminate our live feed. I think we're over an hour already. Y'all are more concerned about us than we are. Honestly, I could go for another hour, but this is our ending point here. But before we really move on, I think we're going to have a great view to really bring Barksdale and Wilcox and Lang's Floridians and Rand's Rights. We can do it all from right here. But I think, Kris, somebody had requested some New Jersey love. We've already given them a lot with the 7th New Jersey, but the 11th New Jersey's up here too, Kris.
Well, remember, Clark's battery has fired more rounds than anyone, according to a U.S. flag.
But we do have somebody, from South Jersey. People from Jersey, they're very particular.
Oh, yeah.
About it. So keep going, Kris.
And the 11th New Jersey's up in this sector. And one of the best books on the Civil War and letter collection is Robert McAllister. McAllister is the colonel of the 11th New Jersey, eventually gets a brigadier general star. But his line was actually just behind us. And his monument is an open book out here for his 11th New Jersey, and is telling their history. He has 275 men deployed along the Emmitsburg Road. He is a colonel. He is a full bird colonel. And by the time this battle is over, the 11th New Jersey is going to be struck on its front and its flank. And they're going to fight so much and take so many casualties that this regiment is down to the command of a lieutenant. That is going from field grade officers all the way down to the lowest level of line officers here. And included in the wounded will be Philip Kearny's nephew. Philip Kearny, who was killed at the Battle of Chantilly, which is actually the catalyst for the modern preservation movement down in Northern Virginia. That's where the American Battlefield Trust origin story comes from. He is wounded out on the battlefield here. This is what we've been looking at in this vicinity. July 2nd, around 6:30 to 7 o'clock at night. George Gordon Meade is somewhere along the main Union battle line, either near the Taj Mahal, which is the Pennsylvania Memorial, or off to the left where we can see George Stannard's Vermont Brigade. He's in that vicinity, and he is calling forward troops from the 2nd Corps, the 1st Corps. Winfield Scott Hancock is down there. He is actively looking into this area. He's going to New York Brigade under George Willard. He's going to point to Wilcox's Alabamians and some Floridians and say, go knock the hell out of him. That was his order.
Dude, he's got his pistol out, leading 3, 4, 6 troops at a time into battle. I mean, this is the commander of the Union Army. This emergency was real, at least at that moment.
Absolutely. It's absolutely real. So down into this swale will go George Willard's brigade, and I've seen 2 different accounts.
That's
of
the
it.
Union Brigade coming toward us.
124th, 125th New York in the front lines. They come down and they meet Barksdale's men, or at least what's left of that conglomeration of them. They're starting to lose all that unit cohesion into what we call the Cadore Thicket. Somewhere in that vicinity, William Barksdale has turned on his horse, and he has his left to the enemy, and he is struck twice in the left leg and then once right through the left lung, right through his chest. He is either helped from his horse, according to Harris Barksdale, who's his nephew, or he falls from his horse. He falls into the Cadore Thicket. A few Mississippians try to extract him from the field, but they're unable to do so. And for the next few hours, William Barksdale lays out in that field. There's some stories about him where he has some of his buttons stolen. Some people saw Masonic imagery on him, so they go and take him to the rear. He's a brigadier general. They're going to take care of him regardless. But Barksdale is eventually extracted from the field by either soldiers from the 26th Pennsylvania or the 14th Vermont. They'll get him back to the rear, to the Hummelbaugh farm, where he will breathe his life away on July 3rd, 1863. But before he does so, before he's put in an ambulance, he's basically chewing out the Yankees, telling them how they're going to be defeated. Even in his last hours of life, he's talking about how Robert E. Lee has a surprise for them, and he is going to defeat them. But they can see blood bubbling from his chest. They said when they gave him water, that water would come out of the hole in his chest. It's a grievous wound. He's tended to by a doctor at the 148th Pennsylvania, the assistant surgeon, whose name's escaping me off the top of my head. But he's also taken care of by a musician named Robert Cassidy, who is giving him morphine and other drugs with water and whiskey, trying to ease his pain. And there's a great regimental quote from the 33rd New York, who didn't fight here. They mustered out of the army in 1863, but they write their regimental history in the midst of the war in 1864. So it's fascinating to see. And they will say that here on the crimson fields of Gettysburg, Barksdale breathed his last breath and his life away without a slave to bring him a cold cup of water. That is 19th century shade being thrown at him. But ironically, there is a musician who's giving him a cold cup of water, and that was Robert Cassidy.
So, gang, if you think about what we've just looked at, I mean, for this, what we've discussed is the largest Confederate attack here at Gettysburg. So, you know, besides 5 minutes, Little Round Top goes Union, but Devil's Den, the wheat field, the peach orchard, all of those have been captured by the Confederates. As the attack rolls up, they're finally where we see the U.S. Regulars Monument, about 7 o'clock in the evening. Rand's Wright's Georgians are going to go around the Cadore barn and house, and there they break through. And this is where we have the Confederate attack taken down. They've now finally, all that activity, what we said, they're the greatest 3 hours of fighting done by any troops on any field of battle has worked. It has pulled Union troops to the south. Now they've broken through, and when they wait for the next part of this attack to come up, to widen that opening and deepen that opening, it doesn't show. They send a runner back, they fight a little longer, and it doesn't show. And finally, it's about 7:30 in the evening. Those Georgians will fall back across the field, and that'll end the fighting on this side of the field. It's interesting to note, you know, for all the Confederate successes that we talk about here, Devil's Den, wheat field, peach orchard, breaking through the line, Clausewitz reminds us the defense is not just a shield, but a series of well-coordinated counterattacks. And it is the Union counterattacks that take place at each one of the decisive moments. And if you want to find a difference between this battlefield and perhaps all those that have come before in the East Coast, it seems whenever the crisis arrives and the wave would break the way of the Confederates, here at Gettysburg, it's a Union unit that steps up. It's a Union unit that arrives at the last minute. It's a Union unit that stays on for another 15, 20, 30 minutes that makes all the difference to preserve this Union line amidst this greatest attack here at Gettysburg.
Nice, God, it's almost like that was pre-planned, Doug. You know, people.
Oh, Garry, do you need water?
Oh no, I'm okay.
Are you sure?
You know, this thing's actually empty.
I didn't see any comments about us drinking water.
Well done, Chris. You know, we're getting some questions about the 1st Minnesota. You know, Palmer is a son of Minnesota. We've got other trust people. There we go, over there. And famously, they did attack from just south of the Pennsylvania Memorial over into that thicket there. But there was, of course, other troops attacking in there as well. The connectivity down there is horrible. We've never succeeded in doing a live video down there, but we have shot static video down there. I'm not sure if it's still on Facebook or on YouTube, but we have done it before, but we just can't do it live. But what this is, of course, is 262 men going into the teeth of, depending on who you listen to, 1,500, 3,000 Confederates that slow down the Southerners for a little while to buy what, 5 or 10 minutes. That's what their lives were worth. As you know, Winfield Scott Hancock, you know, really determined he had to buy that time. He determined that what that is, and he had that moral fiber to order that attack and then do it again at other battles. So when you think about generals and their communication and horsemanship and strategy, think about that, about whether you could do something like that and why so few people make excellent generals. Now, with that, with the attacks of Willard and with Rand's Wright's Georgians being pushed back near the high water mark, which you can see maybe over my shoulder, that's really the end of this massive attack that we've been talking about. The 2.5 division attack going against the potential 41,000 Union soldiers. It ends. The Confederates have gotten the peach orchard. They've moved forward to one side of the wheat field. You know, they've gained some ground and they're going to move their artillery forward, but Meade is still in possession of the exact ground he wants to be in possession of. Now, we've already shot yesterday on the first day. We've done summaries for the first and second day. This morning, we posted our pre-shot video to cover the south end of the field. Yes, we will be going live more, as Andy Poulton back at Civil War Central at our ABT headquarters there said. We're going to go live this afternoon. We're going to go live in the morning. No, we won't tell you when and where, but we hope that you'll be able to join us. So make sure you're subscribed to the American Battlefield Trust YouTube channel. I can't thank you enough. The engagement on this has been off the charts. Your generosity has been off the charts. I really appreciate this yeoman's work out here in the heat and your care for us as we exist out in this heat. I'm sure it's going to be cooler this afternoon when we go out. Yes, we're going to see Wayne Motts. Yes, we're going to see Carol Reardon. You know, unless plans go askew or anything like that. So thanks to Palmer, who's thrown in the deep end here, shooting the stuff and trying to divine our intent. To Doug Douds, man, awesome always. Kris White, thanks so much, man, for your encyclopedic knowledge and the stories that you tell. And thanks to you. Thanks to you all for watching and all your support for battlefield preservation and education. Make sure you go to battlefields.org to check out the lifetime practically of stuff that we have over there. Make sure you click that like and subscribe button. So on behalf of the American Battlefield Trust, thanks for joining us. See you soon.